It was the Great Depression. Opportunities had dried up, and between a failed audition, mounting financial pressure, and a wife who hated his music career, Doc Boggs gave up, and he pawned his banjo. So how did this coal miner and moonshiner go on to inspire a whole new generation of folk singers with his haunting blues-style banjo, even sharing the stage with folks like Bob Dylan and Johnny Cash by the end of his life? Well, that's what we're exploring today, the life of Doc Boggs, his music, and his legacy. You see, Doc Boggs didn't come from the music industry. He came from the coal mines, the moonshine stills, the church revivals, and the barn dances. He learned from black musicians, blending the ballads of Appalachia with the soul of African-American blues. Raw, haunting, and unlike anything else of his time. He made his mark, he lost everything, and he still ended up shaping the sound of American folk music.
I used to be a rounder, I stayed around in town. I used to be a rambler, I stayed round in town. I court pretty Paul and such beauty.
Now, Doc Boggs had very humble beginnings. He was born Moran Lee Boggs in 1898 in a coal mining town called West Norton, Virginia. He was the 10th of 10 kids in a house with no running water and no electricity. His father had sold off their land to the coal mining companies years earlier, and by the time Doc showed up, his future really was underground. At just 12 years old, Doc went to work at the mines. 7 cents an hour, no daylight, no clean air, just pickaxes, black lung, and the ever-present danger of cave-ins. School was a luxury, and his town could only afford to pay a teacher 3 months out of the year, so Doc taught himself to read using a Bible, a dictionary, and a spelling primer. But the thing that really caught hold of Doc, the thing that stuck, was music. His siblings played clawhammer banjo, the traditional way, but to Doc's ears, that sounded a little too neat, too clean, right? Doc wanted something dirtier, more dangerous, and that's when he found Go Lightning. You see, Go Lightning was a black guitarist that roamed the railroad tracks playing for tips, and Doc followed him like a stray dog, eyes wide, ears open, begging him to learn his songs. But the real turning point came in Dorchester when Doc snuck into a black workers camp and he saw Jim White. This was a banjo player who picked the melody notes, and Doc said, "I want to learn how to play the banjo kind of like that fella does. I don't want to play like my sister and brother. I'm going to learn just how to pick with my fingers." He wasn't going to copy the music from his world. He was going to learn from his other. And he developed this crazy style that really no one else had played up to that point. And it's not very popular today, but it sounds amazing. It's kind of similar to a thumb lead banjo style, except he uses 3 fingers. So his index and middle fingers play strings 1 and 2, where his thumb plays the rest of the strings. In 1918, at the age of 20, Doc married Sarah Dalton, a devout Pentecostal. She loved the Lord, and Doc loved playing music at the mining camps. This will become a recurring problem, because Doc kept playing, not in the churches, but in the camps. These dirty, violent, liquor-soaked camps where the music was loud. Doc played songs, ran moonshine, and carried a gun for protection. Sarah was not a fan. To her, music wasn't a livelihood, it was a moral failure. At one point, she refused to even sleep in the same bed with Doc anymore unless he promised to give up secular music. But Doc kept playing. He kept drinking, and he kept running moonshine to scrape together a living. And this wasn't like moonshining like you see in the Beverly Hillbillies or the cartoons. This was dangerous, violent, and very illegal. Probably closer to a cartel than maybe a sitcom, right? And Doc didn't romanticize it. He knew what he was doing. But when you're poor, you make choices. And for many rural musicians, this is where our story ends, right? Mining, running a little moonshine, playing a few tunes here and there. But Doc wanted more. And in 1927, when Brunswick Records sent scouts in the mountains looking for what they called hillbilly music, Doc showed up. And I'll tell you, when he showed up, Doc didn't think he stood a chance, right? There were 75 other musicians there, fancy store-bought suits, nice banjos. Doc showed up half drunk, a flask in his pocket with a borrowed banjo. But he played, and he played country blues and down south blues.
When I had plenty of money, good people, my friends were all standing around. Just as soon as my pocketbook was empty, not a friend on earth to be found. Last time I seen my little woman, good people, she had a wine glass in her hand.
And out of all the musicians that played that day, 3 were chosen, and Doc was one of them. And I think it's important to notice here who was not chosen. A.P. Carter was not chosen. So just pause for a second and think about this. A.P. Carter, the patriarch of the Carter family, Doc Boggs beat him out. He was that good. A month later, Doc boarded a train headed to New York. It was his first time out of the mountains. He was wearing a new suit. He recorded 8 tracks in one session, including Sugar Baby, Danville Girl, and Country Blues. The label liked him. His songs were weird. They were dark. They just didn't sound like anyone else. And for a brief moment, Doc Boggs is on top. He quits the mine, he forms a band, and he starts earning hundreds of dollars a week, which was a huge sum at the time. He buys a new banjo and thinks for the first time in his life, music can really save him. But just as fast as that music lifted him up, the world came crashing down around him. Sarah was still furious about his music, the church was watching, and in 1929, the Great Depression hit. The gigs dried up, the records stopped selling, and the dream, the new suit, the new banjo, the music, it all started to fall apart. By 1930, Doc Boggs was back where he started. In the mines, no record deal, no touring schedule, and no real way out. The Great Depression hit his area particularly hard. No one was buying records, no one was hiring musicians, and Doc, who had just barely gotten a taste of something different, watched it all collapse. He made one last attempt at a deal with Oki Records in 1930, and it was a live audition, and he showed up, and he froze. Stage fright. After that, the offers stopped coming. Back home, Sarah let her opinion be known. Doc's music career had been a moral and a financial failure. It was sinful. And now with the money gone and the pressure rising, Doc did the one thing that truly ended his career. He sold his banjo. And with the mines offering less and less work, mouths to feed, Doc turned back to really what a lot of men did back then in the hard times. He started running moonshine again. He ran whiskey through the back roads of Virginia and Kentucky. It was messy. It was dangerous. At one point, he knocked a deputy's teeth out who tried to shut down a party Doc was at. And he had to flee across state lines. He eventually wrote a song about it called Wise County Jail.
Wash up your face, boys, come up your head. Now get ready for eat coffee and bread. Hard times in the Wise County Jail. It's hard times, I know.
It was a dangerous way to make a living, but for a while, it kept him afloat. He drank hard, he worked odd jobs, and he played a little here and there. Then in 1942, Doc did something that no one expected. He walked into a revival meeting. For whatever reason, right? Maybe he was tired, maybe he was scared, maybe he was just done with the way his life was going. He got saved, and he got sober. He gave up drinking, he gave up running liquor, and he joined Sarah's church. And for the next 20 years, Doc lived a quiet, religious life. And again, for most people, this is where our story ends, right? But not for Doc and his incredible music. Because while Doc was doing his best to survive, a new generation was listening. In 1952, Harry Smith released the Anthology of American Folk Music, and it became the soundtrack for a new generation of folk musicians. Two of Doc's tracks were on that anthology, Country Blues and Sugar Baby, and man, they just hit like a lightning bolt. Those songs are so incredible. Young musicians were obsessed, trying to track down these original artists from this compilation to see if they were still alive. One of these searchers was Mike Seeger, Pete Seeger's half-brother and co-founder of the New Lost City Ramblers. Mike was on a mission, and in 1963, he found Doc Boggs at his home in Virginia, sitting with a banjo. Here's the twist, right? With everything that happened in Doc Boggs' life, the music never left him. And he had recently gotten his hands on a new banjo, and after 30 years had started to play again. Mike Seeger knocked on his door, Doc Boggs opened it, and music history changed forever. That summer, Doc played his first public show in 30 years at the American Folk Festival in Nashville, North Carolina. He was 65 years old, he wore overalls, he played country blues to a stunned crowd, and he was back. He played festivals, he played coffee houses, he recorded 3 new albums for Smithsonian Folkways Records. In 1964, he even played the Newport Folk Festival with Bob Dylan and Johnny Cash. And this man still needed a tranquilizer just to walk on stage, but man, once he got up there, the sound hadn't changed. It was still raw, it was still weird, it was still unmistakably Doc Boggs. Doc played as long as he could, but by 1970, his health had started to fail, and he passed away on his 73rd birthday in 1971. Doc Boggs clawed his way out of the mines, out of the bottle, out of obscurity, and somehow, against all odds, onto a festival stage in front of thousands. He played like someone who knew what it meant to be haunted and still keep singing. And that's why I think nearly 100 years later, we still listen to him.